My life was in total chaos and it made no sense to me at all. But now I'm beginning to understand what on earth God is doing in my life.
What on earth is God doing in your life? I hope by now you have a good handle on one thing that He may be doing in your life, because He made you to do something He didn't make anybody else to do. And when you begin to understand that God, the Father, is the vine dresser of this beautiful vineyard that we've made just for this course, and that He was the one who acts on all these branches to help them bear from no fruit, to more fruit, to much fruit. And so far in our course, we've tried to help you understand that He fashioned you to do something that He decided that He wanted somebody to do before He created the world. And that He then thought of what that kind of person needed to be like, when they needed to live, where they needed to be alive at, who their parents need to be, and if they had brothers and sisters, and how smart they were, or what they were good at, just to, as we talked about, to do those good works on this line of the divine plan of God. And then we spent 2 sessions on a challenging topic, and I just want to express appreciation, because I dealt with a difficult topic. What does it mean to take away? And during lunchtime, we were in the back room, and I was having a cup of coffee and sitting and talking to my wife, and a couple of my friends came in, and they said that was a challenging topic. I said, I know. I said, how was it? Well, you can't argue with what the Greek says. It's right there in black and white. I said, yeah, but that's a delicate topic. And then I said this to them, to my friends. I said, when I was trying to decide, let me borrow this for a minute, what to do with this course, I had to decide, do I have the right to skip verses that are challenging? Because He's the one who gave the content. And if He gave it, He doesn't want me to skip the verses because they're harder to deal with. And I hope by now you understand that when Jesus talked about if a branch in me, which is a believer, bears no fruit for a period of time, that God, who sees this continuing habit, finally realizes, oh, this thing fell down into the dirt. And He doesn't want it in the dirt. It's unhealthy. This person in the dirt is never happy. You just aren't. So He comes along with His bucket as the vine dresser, picks up this branch, cleans it up, pats it down, and ties it back into the sun. Why? He doesn't want it here. He wants it to move over here, to the beginning of fruit. Well, now we're on the second part of this. What does God do to a branch that's not in the dirt anymore, that's bearing fruit? Because ultimately, Jesus revealed something about His Father. He said, by this, my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit. This is the picture that the Father has in mind, and Jesus is revealing that's what my Father wants. And since the Father is the vine dresser and is responsible to generate the maximum amount of fruit, He comes back to this branch who has some fruit. Things are starting to turn around. And my question is, what does He do to move a branch from here to here, from fruit to more fruit? And in these 2 sessions, we're going to pull back that veil that Jesus Christ opened when He revealed, here's what my dad does when this takes place in a person's life. So take a look at your workbook, and let's get into this. A session deals with, what does God do in your life when you start bearing fruit? I want to read Titus chapter 3, and let our people also learn to maintain good works, to meet urgent needs, that they may not be unfruitful. All right, part 1. What does the vine dresser do when he prunes? Let's read that passage together right beneath part number 1. Let's read it together. I am the true vine.
And my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, let it go away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. You are already thin because
So when a person moves out of the no fruit season, the father gets rid of the bucket. It doesn't need it anymore. Doesn't need to tie back up that branch. The branch is back on the trellis. Instead, he picks something up that clips things off. Oh, I don't know which is better, the bucket or the clippers. Whoa, it's a good question. He prunes. What does it mean to prune? Can I do one? He prunes not the vine, never prunes the vine. You always prune a branch. What's a branch? A believer. Really? He uses this. Yeah. This is a pruning tool. And this is getting in the way. Whoa. Ah! What'd you do? Excuse me. I just pruned you. Well, what did I do wrong? What? What did I do wrong? Who said you did something wrong? This leaf here, that's taking too much sap. This is going to be a waste right here. No, I don't want that. Nope. What does the branch do when things are cut off? It screams. What did I do wrong? Answer, nothing. What? You're doing something wrong over there. You're doing something right here. What am I doing right? I'm bearing fruit. And it prunes so that it will bear more fruit. This piece of wood takes sap that comes up that vine and gets into the branch, and instead of going into grapes, it goes into wood. It takes sap I need for more grapes. So I'm getting rid of it. Until you understand that is precisely what the Father does to you and to me when we're doing some things right. When we're bearing fruit, he acts in a way that still hurts. And so what happens is people don't understand that this is not the same as this. That chastening is because of my sin. Hurts. And pruning is because of my obedience, and it hurts. And therefore everybody thinks it's always because of something I did wrong. When Jesus says, oh, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. Sometimes it's because you're doing a lot right. So I can't wait to teach this to you. This changed my life a lot, because I never understood there were two things. When things were painful, I always concluded I must have sin in my life somewhere that's causing this. Have you ever thought that way? All right, let's get into it then. Point number 1, every branch that bears fruit describes a fruit-bearing believer. Jesus isn't talking about non-Christians here. That it may bear more fruit reveals God's primary goal in pruning. What does he want? More fruit, not more stick, not more leaves. What happens to a vineyard that's left to itself? Do you know? I didn't know because I never grew up around this. But when our children were young, we made a decision as a family to move way out to the country. And we were able, by saving all of our little bit of money we had, to buy an old rundown farm that nobody else seemed to want. And it had a barn that has big holes in it. And it was inside this barn was an older than me, old tractor. And I loved riding a tractor because I could bush hog. You know what bush hog is? When you cut the things behind the tractor with a great big lawnmower. I loved it because you could actually see you were doing something. And this was a big piece of property. It had a lot of hectares in it. And I was just cleaning it, clearing it up, just using the bush hog and having a ball. The wheels, where high is this? It must have been a 60-year-old tractor. And I went to one area of the farm I hadn't even been to before. And I'm cutting it, and all of a sudden I see some red. It was in the middle of the summer, and lo and behold, there was a vineyard underneath all these weeds. Nobody told me about this. So I turned off the tractor and I got it down. I said, look at all this. Look how these vines are big. Man, they're all over the place. And I went down and I picked up a cluster and they were small grapes. And I said, well, I've never seen one this small before. This must be a different kind of grape than I've ever tasted. And I put it in my mouth and it was so sour, I actually spit it back on the ground. And I said to myself, oh, what kind of grape is this? And the next week I was outside working and the next door neighbor come over and I said to him, I didn't know there was a vineyard here. Oh, yeah, many years ago. The previous owner had a great vineyard, but it's been like that for 10 years. I said, the grapes are terrible. He starts laughing. No, they're not terrible. They haven't been pruned. So what do you mean? He said all the sap went into growing these long, long branches and all these leaves, and there wasn't any sap left over for the grapes. And I ran right into this truth. If you want more, you have to have less. If you want more grapes, you have to have less branch and less leaves. And we get excited about the leaves. And God doesn't. So let's get on to this. The next point, number 3. He prunes, specifies that the pruning agent is God the Father. To prune is a careful act. Underline those 2 words. It's a careful act of the vine dresser to cut back, to produce more. Now, what happens to a person who goes through some of his pruning who doesn't understand what God's doing? You'll misinterpret God. God's trying to help you bear more by cutting back some things that don't make any difference. 4.1. Pruning is the primary method to make branches or Christians more productive. So when you pray this prayer, dear God, I want to do more for you. Do you know what you're asking God to do? I want to do what you do. Okay, I've been waiting for that. I'm so glad to hear. And then we say, what did I do wrong to deserve that? This will change your life. I'd change mine because I misunderstood all of this. So, next point. 4.2. Pruning redirects the sap from the vine, from excess wood, leaves, and shoots, little tiny outgrowths, to fruit. There's only so much sap coming up the vine into the branch. And if it's being wasted by things that aren't fruit, the Father wants to get rid of some. Number 4.3, pruning takes considerable expertise so as not to harm the branch. 4.4, pruning occurs numerous times throughout the season. I want you to understand something very important. No vine dresser comes and prunes and prunes and prunes and prunes and prunes and prunes because the branch will die. So at different times in the year, a vine dresser comes along and cuts certain things out and then leaves it alone. Then it grows some more and comes back and cuts something different out. So it happens at different times, not all the time. Next point, 4.5. Pruning uses different tools in order to prune most effectively. And we're going to go through the tools that God uses in a human's life to prune them. Now, I want you to star number 4.6. It's the deepest truth I'm going to teach you in this section. Pruning occurs at certain times, but the fruit or the result of the pruning only sprouts later. That's an important observation. That is, when a vine dresser comes along and cuts certain things out, you don't see all of a sudden this cluster of grapes growing larger. And you don't see a brand new cluster showing up. It's because the sap now begins to move differently in the branch or in your life, and later on there's more fruit coming out. And here's what most people do. They say later on, when they begin to notice things have changed a lot, I don't know what happened. My life is just so, I'm able to do so much more for God. And they forgot. That's why. And if you don't understand, there's time between pruning and the fruit. You'll get discouraged. So when I'm going through a period of pruning, I know later on I'm going to look back at this season and say, oh man, I'm so glad I went through that. Because nobody likes going through pruning when it's happening to you. Okay, next point, point number 5. You are already clean. Remember in the text, look at verse number 3. You are already clean because the word in which I have spoken to you. When Jesus said you are already clean, he's talking about Christ having pruned them through his word. It's the scripture that prunes you a lots of times and makes you clean. And he's talking to his disciples at that point. Part number 2. If you start bearing fruit, which is right, what does God do? Hopefully by now you're clear on that, but I want to go a little deeper with you. Number 1, God's pruning seeks to stimulate you, to change something in you, to focus on bearing more fruit purposefully, on bearing more fruit purposefully. What does that mean? When you're on this side and there's just some fruit, you typically just respond to maybe some opportunities that happen to you. But as you're pruned more and more, you know what happens to you? You become focused on good works yourself in your mind. You begin looking for places and for people that you can do a good work for. Over on that side, you don't. You just respond to a crisis. On this side, you understand that's why I'm here. This is my life here. He made good works ahead of time for me to do for him, and I'm hunting for them all the time. It's very different, isn't it? One's reactive and one's proactive. It's proactive. So that's what begins to happen to you. Point 1.1. Unlike chastening, pruning isn't because you've done something wrong, but because you've done something right. 1.2. Unlike chastening, pruning seeks to increase the good works you already are doing. Point number 2, God's pruning seeks to channel your life due to a deeper, eternal perspective. You see your life differently. You understand the purpose of my life is to do those good works. Point number 3, I want to camp out on this for a minute because this is what God does. God's pruning seeks to reallocate, to redirect your primary resources of your life. Look up here for a minute. What resources do I have in my life? I have time. That's what you do too. I have some of this. You do too. And I got some abilities that I can do. And so do you. That's what I have. What else do I have? I don't know. I have influence? Good. That's a good one. I do. So do you. But the big ones, what are you going to do with your time? Is your time going to be invested for this? Is your talent going to be invested more for this? Do you understand where I'm going? Okay. So point number 3, God's pruning seeks to reallocate or redirect your primary resources for greater productivity. And if you've been around 10 long, you hear me talk about that all the time. How do you double your church, your business, your personal productivity? How do you multiply it? How do you break through to the next level? Why is all that there? Because of this. You're supposed to become more productive. So point number 3.1, pruning seeks to encourage you to redirect your time. If your time doesn't change, what you do with your evenings and your weekends, over time it should change. You should be focusing on what I want to do. For instance, do you have a time in the week that you just do good works? You lead a Bible study. You go take care of some kids. Do you go visit some poor people who don't have enough food and bake some for them? Do you take like a Thursday night and say, I'm going to use Thursday nights from now on. And I'm going to be looking all the time for a good work that needs to be done. And on Thursday night, I'm going to go do that. That's what happens with your time. Number 3.2, pruning seeks to encourage you to redirect your talents. Your talents. And I teach you about this in How to Double. And I want to tell you a story that happened to our family. We take vacations. We believe in vacations because when God told Israel about their work, he said, I want you to take 3 weeks of vacation every year. We went down to the beach. And on Sunday, we wanted to go visit a church. And we didn't know anybody, and so we just found a church that we were staying. And I wanted to remain anonymous as much as I could on vacations. And when you're well known, it's hard to do that. And so we would just go sit in the back row as a family, and I would just kind of try to fade in the woodwork so that I could get something out of it. And afterwards, it was a great service, and the church was packed. It was packed. Then we were on our way out, and the pastor was there at the door, as typically pastors are, and I said to him, that was terrific today. You ministered to all of our family. Thank you so much. I said, your church is packed. And he said, have we met? I said, no, we haven't met. I'm just having a vacation. And thanks so much. He said, no, wait. It's your face. Well, he had read some of our books, and finally we were talking a little bit. And I said to him, wow, your church is packed. He said, do you want to know what happened? Yes, what happened? He said, a while ago, I was at the door saying goodbye, and one of the men who lives here and has a big national company was on his way out and was shaking my hand. I said to him, you're going to have to stand accountable to Jesus for this. The man said, what? He said, yeah, you are. For what? For not using your talents. The man said, what talents are you talking about? I says, what do you do for a living? He says, I'm in marketing. I help big companies grow. I said to this man, well, then why don't you use your talent to double this church? To double this church? Yeah. And then the pastor said, would that be hard for you? Well, of course not. You only have 200 people here. I wouldn't even give that to a VP. I'd give that to a starting person. Going from 200 and asking for 200 new customers? How hard is that? Then the pastor said to him, well, then do it. And the guy said, you want me to double your church? Yeah, I thought it's your church too. Well, it is my church. Well, can you? Of course. Will you? Okay, I will. He said within 30 days he had doubled the church. Think about what you're hearing. That's a man who has a gift and a talent of marketing and never had dreamt in his mind to use that talent for more fruit. What's your talent? Then are you using it for more fruit? No matter what your talent is, you can. Next point. Pruning seeks to encourage you to redirect your treasure. Oh, redirect your treasure. There's a great quote by Livingston at this point. Very famous man, one of my heroes and probably some of yours. He said this, I will place no value on anything I have, said David Livingston, or may possess except in relationship to the kingdom of Christ. So what happens here is you take the money that you have, watch this, and you start using less of it for you. Doesn't mean you earn more. It just means you take less. And you start watching, not only for your church, but for people in your neighborhood who are desperate for some money. It can change everything. I don't have time to teach this to you now. I'll do that in the course on how to be sent on a miracle mission for God. But this is where I put the money that I'm not going to give to my church. I already gave to my church, our church, and say my church. And I put the money in this little pocket. And I say to God, I hereby give you this money. You can give it to anybody you want. Just nudge me when you want me to deliver your money. This is called a God pocket. And it has money in it. And then you watch God. You say to him, let me know. And he will. He'll bump you. And sometimes it's a person who never anybody would think needs money. They're dying inside. And then you got to trust the Lord in leading you. I'll teach you about how to do that in that other course. And you'll deliver a miracle to somebody. Because they'll tell you, this was a miracle. How'd you know to give me money? Okay, let's go on. The treasure. Point number 4. You can read the verse beneath it on your own. God's pruning seeks to clarify and sharpen your unique life purpose. What is your unique life purpose? To do good works that God prepared for you ahead of time. We've already read in our course Philippians 3, but I want to go over 4.1. When experiencing pruning, you think more often about the meaning of your life. You do. And when experiencing pruning, you think more often about what God wants you to do rather than what you want to do. 4.3, when experiencing pruning, you become more determined than you used to be to serve God. When experiencing pruning, you release past failures so you can focus on the future. 4.5, when experiencing pruning, you consciously desire more deeply to bear more fruit. How many of you identify with those statements? Let me see your hands. Yeah. Why? We're all the same. So when you're feeling that, you should say to yourself, I'm going through pruning. Let me think about this for a minute. Number 5, God's pruning seeks to align your life to serve others with your heart passion. Now this you need to star and think about. The good works that God made you to do, you remember from earlier in the course that God makes you perfectly to do those good works, which means they should come kind of naturally to you. They shouldn't be hard. You should never say to yourself, I don't want to do that. You're probably out of the good work He wants you to do. That doesn't mean you don't use discipline, because you do. So this should mean as you are more and more pruned, watch this now, from all the possible good works, you start narrowing the good works that you know you're called to do. Oh, that's what I'm called more to do. And the older you get, the more clear that becomes. Why? He's been cutting off these things. These things aren't wrong. These things aren't sin. They're just not for you. You should love doing what God wants you to do. Then if you're not, you're probably doing it because somebody made you feel guilty if you didn't do it. Is this making sense to you? 5.1, pruning lessens the pleasure you experience from unfruitful activities. Those are not sins. They're just not making a difference to heaven. Pruning intensifies your passion for God by requiring personal sacrifice. Pruning increases your desire to bring great joy to God's heart. Pruning redirects your activities to those that bring you greater joy, not obligation. That's a major point I'm trying to break in. When you're in the middle of God's will, doing the work, you should love doing it, whatever it is. Part 3. Well then, can we go a bit deeper in the last couple of minutes? Because when God prunes you, He doesn't ask for permission. And He doesn't check with you when He's going to start or what He's going to cut. So that means you lost control. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you're doing something right, and He wants more right. But when He does it, you got to deal with this. When He does it, when He prunes. Boy, I'm going to talk more about this in the next session. Pruning hurts. It does. And where He prunes, you may be thinking he's going to prune this part right here. No, He's not. He's taking this big part right here. So if you don't watch out, His gift of pruning to help you get to there whereas you want to get, you'll misunderstand Him and you'll get mad at Him. You will. So, let's get these down. Some big ideas to you. They don't take long to grab a hold of. I call this, how do you feel about God's universal with everybody, pruning system? There are 4 main points here. Number 1, do you believe in your heart that God prunes you at the perfect moment? That He's not 1 second late and He's not 1 second early. And your God who loves you more than anybody and knows all about time and know what's coming over here, that he prunes you at the perfect moment. 1.1, do you believe that God starts pruning you at the perfect time? No, we don't. No, we don't. We don't like the perfect time. But in your heart of heart, do you believe that that is the truth about him? 1.2, do you believe that God prunes you for the perfect duration, meaning how long he keeps pruning? So many times, God puts me with a person that's at the tail end of a long season of pruning. And I ask the question, do you think God's been doing this too long? Oh, yeah. It should have ended 6 months ago. Okay, that's the point. At least once in your life, at least once, unless you have decided, I'm staying over there, and you get out every once in a while, run back to the dirt. But if you go along, at least one in your life, you're going to have a pruning that doesn't seem to ever end. And I'm going to show you on a chart where that happens, because it happens to everyone. It doesn't seem to ever. Do you really believe that it's for the right length of time? No, you won't. Not at that time. So be careful at that time that you don't get angry with him because you don't understand. Okay, next point. Do you believe the Father pruned you with the perfect motive? The perfect motive. Romans 8, beautiful passage. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who on earth can be against us? Nobody. He who did not spare his own son, but delivered him up for us all. Read it with me. How shall he not with him also freely give us all things? What's God's motive in pruning you? There's two parts to it. Do you know? Part one, he wants more fruit. But what's the deeper reason? The deeper reason is he gets glory, but he wants on the other side, when Christ comes back again, he wants his son to be able to reward you in ways that will cause you to sing the rest of forever. And that's based upon your good works. He's pruning you for you. It's for you. 2.1, do you believe that God prunes you with your best interests in mind? Number 2, do you believe that God manipulates and uses you unfairly? 2.3, do you believe that God is an abusive or uncaring attitude toward you? If you do, you're going to have trouble with pruning. Number 3, do you believe the Father prunes you with the perfect method? Oh, man, this is how he does it. Look at the passage beneath it. Ladies, read it to us. Here we go. And we know that all things. We know that. How many things? Do you realize that God loves you more than anybody, and that God can think of all the possible ways to prune you and picks the one way that's the most effective? It's how he's going to do it, and that's what he uses with you. That's the best method that there is. It works together for whose good? For your good. Boy, can you embrace? This is hard to do until you understand. Can you take this and put it in your heart? Yeah, but wait. That's where it is for me. It's inside of me. I value this, and I love him for doing this to me. If it's like this, you'll never get very far here. You got to believe when he does it, where he does it, and how he does it is perfect. And if God brought you to heaven just for a split second and said, hey, daughter, come with me. Let me show you why I'm doing what I'm doing. You would say, oh, that is beautiful. Don't change a thing. Don't change a thing. Number 3.1, do you believe that God pruned you with the perfect pruning tools? Do you believe that God prunes you carefully and limits any unnecessary pain in your life? And number 4 is the most challenging one. Do you believe the Father prunes you with perfect magnitude? of how big the pruning is. Magnitude. Magnitude, the size, how much. Now, Paul understood pruning like very few people ever did, and he wanted us to know something that's powerful. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Whose love? Christ's love for me, or God's love for me. Shall tribulation separate it? No, Or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? No. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor power, nor Satan, nor demons, nor anything present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. So the question I have for you is, 4.1, do you believe that God prunes you to the perfect depth? That he doesn't cut too much? 4.2, you do believe that God prunes you to the perfect breadth. What does that mean? In the one season of your life that it is a severe pruning, it's going to feel like every area of your life is being pruned. That's how it feels. 4.3, do you believe that God prunes you with the perfect difficulty, that it's not too difficult for you to handle? 4.4, the perfect complexity, because you're going to feel overwhelmed. And 4.5, the perfect severity, because you're going to feel like it's too severe. I want to check the audience for a minute in the room here. How many of you have been through this severe pruning at least once, that you felt all those words? Let me see your hands. Yeah. That's universal, isn't it? Part number 4. Now you know. The second process of what has been happening in your life, what God has been doing in your life. 5 statements. Many believers aren't aware of the depth, scope, and timing of God's pruning in their lives. They aren't aware that God's pruning them. And he is. Number 2, many believers don't connect the difficulties and crises with God's refining process. Number 3, many believers don't focus nearly enough on what they're trading their life to achieve. Number 4, many believers don't recognize the depth of God's desire that you bear much fruit. And many believers don't recognize they can increase their fruitfulness anytime they want. Closing illustration. After we had that farm, we had to move closer to town, and we bought a place, and on the line between our neighbor, who was an old farming couple, and our home was a fence. And on that fence were grapevines right along the fence. And we didn't know if we owned that or they owned it because it was on the line. And one day, the old farmer next door, who we became friends with, was killing the vines. He was just cutting them and slashing them, and I didn't know him too well yet, and I got my lawnmower. And I turned it on, and I brought my lawnmower right over to where he was. He had a hat on, a straw hat. And he said, are you having a good time? I said, yeah. He said, why are you mowing with your business shoes on? I said, I forgot to change, sorry. And I said, don't you like grapes? What? Don't you like grapes? Oh, I love grapes. Well, why are you killing the grapevines? He said, are you a city boy, aren't you? I said, well, not really, but I probably, yeah. He said, well, you can have a choice. I can have a choice, yeah. You can have a lot of leaves and no grapes. Or you can have a little bit of leaves and a lot of grapes. What do you want? The leaves or the grapes? You can't have both. That's what I learned the secret, that when God prunes, it's for my good, and it's for his glory, and it's for more of these. And these are terrific.
Coming up next, session questions. But first, enjoy these gifts from Teach Every Nation. Just visit the link below to obtain your free downloads.